Alright, value hierarchies, ultimate judgment of success, part 2. So I gave something to move away from something that was antithesis of his values. Most of the people, even when they normally move toward, will move away from losing key value. Next, I gave an alternative, something to move toward. I gave them specific tasks with serve as an evidence procedure for his parents to either determine the ability to continue supporting values of security, happiness, and trust that were so important to him that he was there. He was to be at home every night at 9 or 10 p.m. He was to have a job within 7 days. He was to do his duties at home every day. I was told him that he would review his progress in 60 days. If he kept his agreements, his parents' trust level would expand. So would their support for the personal happiness and security. I made it clear to him that these were necessities, things that he had to move toward right now. If he broke one agreement once, it would be reviewed as a learning experience. If he broke agreement twice, it would earn him a warning. If he broke the agreement a third time, he'd be gone. What I did was give them the things to move toward right away with in order to maintain and keep the enjoyment of things he valued in the past. He just hadn't had the right things to move toward with the support of the relationship with his parents that made it clear that these things were totally necessary. Gave him the specific evidence procedure to follow. When last heard from him, he was still behaving like a model kid. His values meta programs together provided an ultimate motivating tools. I had given them a way to create within himself the security, happiness, trust as he needed. He who knows much about others may be learned, but he who understands himself is more intelligent. He who controls others may be powerful, but he who has mastered himself is mightier still. I think you can see that just how the explosive the values are and how valuable they can be as tools of their change. In the past, your values have operated entirely with a subconscious level. Now, you have the ability to both understand and manipulate people for the positive change. There's a time that we didn't know where an atom was, so we were unable to make that awesome power learn about the value of the same and effective of us by bringing it with a consciousness. We produced the result never could before. We played with the bottom buttons that we didn't know that existed before. Remember, values of the belief system that have a global effect with the soul that make the change in value, even eliminating conflicts and enhancing the power of them and empowering values, we can make profound changes in our life. So I'm feeling uneasy about the value of the conflict we were barely understood in the past. We can understand what's going on within us, between us, and other than begin to generate with the new results. What we do in these many ways, we can reframe the experience over the most effective that we can change with the evidence procedure by manipulating some modalities as we've done with throughout this book. When values conflict with a real conflict, often between one or many evidence procedures, we can turn the down the picture sound in such a way to make the conflict unnoticeable. In some cases, we can even change the values of themselves. We can have the value you wish for higher on your hierarchy. You can change the sub-modalities. So it's more like those of the top hierarchy. In most cases, it's much easier and the most effective to deal with sub-modalities. But I think you can see just how powerful these techniques can be. In this way, you can change your level of importance value with the changing of the way with the represent them and them to your brain. For example, there was a man I'm counseling with the number 1 value was usefulness, long time number 9 on his ladder. As I can imagine, with this kind of value hierarchy, he made things that don't build tremendous amounts of the rapport with other human beings. I found out that he represented the number 1 value with the useful, with the big picture moved to the right, which is very bright, with a certain tone associated with it. After comparing with how he represented a much lower rank value, love a much smaller picture of the black and white with a different position, lower, darker, dimmer, defocused. All I needed to do was making some modalities a lower rank value exactly like those with a higher rank value, but making some modalities highly ranked value just like those with the lower rank value, with creating a switch pair and keep them there. By doing this change the way he felt about his values, he changed this with hierarchy. Love became the number 1, radically alerted the way he perceived the world was the most important number to him, thus the kind of actions created with a consistent basis. Changing someone's value hierarchy can be a huge implication that may not immediately be apparent. The usually best start with the discovering person's evidence procedure, changing his perception of whether he's achieving his values before actually changing the latter importance. I think you can see how this would be valuable in the personal relationship. Some of the persons with the number 1 value is attraction, number 2 is honest communication, number 3 is creative, and the number 4 is respect. These are all 2 approaches to creating a feeling of satisfaction within the same relationship. One would be to make the respect with the number 1 value, make the attraction number 4. Thereby, you can take an individual with no longer attracted to apart and make the feeling less important than respect for her. As long as he respected her, he wouldn't feel the highest need was being fulfilled. The simple, less radical approach would be to determine his evidence procedure for finding someone attractive. What does he have to say with a hear or feel, with either changing with the attraction strategy, have himself share with his partner what he needs to have the value fulfilled. Most of the same values that conflict, and most of them some values that conflict. We get out of the great result of the world. We want to relax on the beach. We want to spend time with our families. We want to work hard enough to be a success at our jobs. We want security. We want excitement. Some value conflict with the inevitable lens for the creating certain richness and texture in life. The problem comes from fundamental values pulls over the different direction. After reading the chapter, look at your value hierarchy. Evidence procedure C with where it complex and or seeing the clearly first step of the resolving them. Values primary society as well, with the individual history of the United States over the past 20 years of the wrenching study of the important variable of the values. What was the upheaval of the 60s by cataclysm? Example of the value of conflict. Suddenly a huge vocal segment of the society was professional values that clashed radically with those of the society as a whole. Many of our country with most cherished values, patriotism, family, marriage, and work ethic were suddenly being questioned. The result was a period of societal incongruity and turmoil. There are two main differences between now and then. One of the most of the kids of the 60s have found with new and more positive ways to express their values. In the 60s, a person may have felt freedom, meaning using drugs and growing longer hair. Now in the 80s, the same person may feel that owning a business, being in control of his life, is the most effective way to achieve the same result. Of the other differences is that our values have changed. We look at the evolution of the American value over the past 25 years, and you don't really see the victory of the one set of values over another. Instead, you see a different set of values that has evolved in some ways. We've gone back to some traditional values of patriotism or family life, and in others we've adopted many of the values of the 60s. We are more tolerant. We have different values about the rights of women and minorities, about the nature of productive, satisfying work. There's a hopeful lesson for all of us in what's evolved. The values and change with the people change with the only people that don't change with are those who don't breathe. And some important thing to be aware of the flux of the move on with it. Remember the example of the people who struggle on one outcome and only to find that it no longer fits their value with a lot. Some of the find ourselves in a situation at a different time. The way around attentively and actively reckoning with our values, evidence, procedures we've constructed for them. We all have to live with some degree of incongruity. That's the part of the ambiguity of being human. Just as societies go through a period of flux, like the 60s people do too, but if you know what's happening, we're better able to cope with and to change what we can. I feel the incongruity don't understand well often inappropriate kinds of action. We'll start smoking, drinking, whatever we do to handle the frustration we don't understand. First step, the toil of dealing with value conflicts, to understand them, ultimate success for the whole truth with the values as well with anything else. You need to know what you want with primary values of the value hierarchy. You need to take action. You need to develop the sensory acuity to know what you're getting, and you need to develop the flexibility to change this present behavior to do not match your values. You need to modify your behaviors to resolve the conflict. There's a final point, whether it's worth considering. Remember, we're all modeling at all time. Our kids, our employees, our business associates are always modeling it in us in different ways. If we want to be effective models, there's nothing more important than ever strong values and congruent behavior. Modeling behavior is important, but values override almost everything else. And standing with a commitment with light reflects as unhappiness and confusion. Those who receive the model would link up to the idea of commitment with a confused unhappiness. If you stand for the commitment as your life reflects excitement and joy, you're providing congruent model with links up with commitment and joy. Think of the people that have affected you most in your life. Chances are that they provide the most effective congruent model for the people who value the behaviors provide with the most vibrant and compelling model of success. The most important motivating forces of the history of the religious books like the Bible are nothing so much as values, stories that tell the situation, describe the models that have enriched the life of the poor, most people on the planet, gives those values the greater power. Discovering someone's values is a simple matter of finding out what is more important to him or her, but knowing that you can effectively know not just the needs of your own. In the next chapter, we're going to look at 5 things every successful person has to confront and deal with in order to use and apply what we talked about in this book. I call them the 5 Keys to Wealth and Happiness, Chapter 19.